Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea reports almost 800 new cases of COVID-19, the highest daily figure since early January. There's been a significant drop, though, in the number of severe cases. South Korea posts a record high amount of foreign currency transactions. As global trade gradually resumes, local investors jump into overseas stocks and foreign investors buy up Korean bonds. And President Jaein speaks to leaders from 40 countries at President Biden's climate summit, pledging that South Korea will upgrade its commitments to reducing carbon emissions. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea appears to be on the verge of a fourth wave of COVID-19, with the country's daily tally on Friday reaching just shy of 800. That's the highest tally recorded since early January. But with the vaccine campaign underway, there have been improvements in the rate of severe cases and the fatality rate. Kim Sung-min reports.
South Korea is seeing a spike in COVID-19 cases in what could be the start of a fourth wave of infections. The country on Friday recorded 797 new cases of COVID-19, the highest number in 106 days. Earlier this week, numbers dropped to under 600, but since then, cases have been rising for 5 days in a row. Of Friday's cases, 758 were local transmissions. Major clusters include one on a naval ship with 32 crew members confirmed. And at a daycare center for senior citizens in Bucheon, Gyeonggi-do Province, 36 people caught the virus. However, despite the uptick in daily cases, there have been some improvements in reducing the number of severely ill patients and the fatality rate.
The rate of severe cases dropped from 4.7% in December down to 1.7% in March. The fatality rate fell from 2.7 down to less than 0.5% in March.
Health authorities explained that preliminary testing and vaccination efforts for vulnerable groups like those in elderly healthcare facilities contributed to the improvement. Meanwhile, the government is demonstrating the new social distancing rules in Gyeongsangbuk-do Province. Starting next week, level 1 of the proposed new 4-tier system will be applied to 12 local districts with low population density before it is officially introduced across the country. While level 1 in the new system doesn't have restrictions on gatherings, the 12 districts will still be subject to the ban on gatherings of 9 or more people. The government's new distancing rules come with its further vaccination efforts. Starting from next week, health authorities are aiming to inoculate an average of 150,000 people a day. This is part of the country's plan to give shots to 1/4 of the population in the first half of the year. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
Some European countries are relaxing their virus prevention rules as daily case numbers come down, though life will still be quite different than it was before the pandemic. And in the U.S., data show that the vaccines are bringing down the number of deaths among seniors. Jang Tae-hyun reports.
European countries are gradually easing lockdown measures. Italy will allow restaurants and bars in yellow zones where the virus spread is low to serve customers at outdoor tables until 11 p.m. starting next Monday. The Netherlands will remove its curfews and allow restaurants and cafes to take customers seated outside from next Wednesday. France will lift its domestic travel ban and resume in-person classes for secondary schools in early May.
The health situation is improving in our country. For the past 10 days, we've been seeing a genuine decrease in virus transmission.
Meanwhile, in the U.S., COVID-19 hospitalizations among over 65s have fallen by more than 70% since the start of the year. Data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention shows that deaths among those aged 65 and older have declined by more than 50% since the peak in January. This shows the effectiveness of vaccination, as 2/3 of senior citizens have received 2 doses of the vaccine. Meanwhile, the U.S. CDC will convene a meeting of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices on Friday to review cases of rare blood clots related to the Janssen vaccine. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration and CDC had ordered an immediate pause last week of the single-dose Janssen vaccine after finding 6 cases of rare blood clots. Jang Tae-hyun, Arirang News.
The European Central Bank has decided to stick with its monetary easing policy, citing the uncertainty that still remains because of the pandemic. It's keeping its key interest rates steady near 0%, and it's not looking at curtailing its bond buying. Lee Seung-jae reports.
As widely expected, the European Central Bank on Thursday left its key interest rate unchanged at 0%, with the marginal lending rate and deposit rate unchanged as well at 0.25% and minus 0.5% respectively. Despite clear signs of improvements, the head of the central bank noted that a resurgence in virus cases remains a concern.
Euro area financing conditions have remained broadly stable recently after the increase in market interest rates earlier in the year. But risks to wider financing conditions remain. Against this background, the Governing Council decided to reconfirm its very accommodative monetary policy stance. We will keep the key ECB interest rates unchanged.
Despite a contraction in economic activity in the first quarter, Lagarde remained optimistic that the rollout of vaccines and a gradual relaxation of virus measures should trigger a firm rebound in economic activities this year. Data also show the central bank's weekly Pandemic Emergency Purchase Program, or PEPP purchases, averaged about 16.9 billion euros in the 4 weeks following its March meeting, compared to the 14.4 billion euros in the first 8 weeks of 2021. Asked if there was a plan on phasing out the program, Lagarde said the topic was not discussed and it's premature to discuss phasing it out. The European Central Bank concluded the pandemic isn't going away quickly, referring to the economy as being on crutches, adding the bloc wasn't yet ready to stand on its own. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The gradual reopening of the global economy and Korean investors jumping into global stocks sent Korea's daily foreign currency transactions to an all-time high in the first quarter. Also, foreign investors have been buying up Korean government bonds. Kim Jae-hee has the details.
South Korea's daily average foreign exchange transactions in the first 3 months of 2021 rose to their highest since records began in 2008. Data from the Bank of Korea showed on Friday that daily transactions of foreign currencies and derivatives reached an average of almost 61 billion US dollars in the first quarter of this year. This is 20.7% higher than the daily average in the fourth quarter of last year. The central bank attributed the rise to recovery in trade, foreign purchases of Korean bonds, and increased investment in stocks.
Imports and exports in the first quarter of this year rose compared to the fourth quarter of last year. An increase in foreign investors' holding of Korean bonds and local investors snapping up more overseas stocks, including those from the U.S., also contributed to rise in transactions involving foreign currencies.
Transactions of foreign currencies in the first quarter climbed 21.8% on quarter, and trading of foreign exchange derivatives expanded 19.9%. One expert says foreign investors are flocking to the South Korean bond market for its high yields.
Foreigners have been buying about $8 to $9 billion of Korean bonds every month since February. The yield on 5-year government bonds in Korea is at around 1.5%, but other similar credit-rated countries have negative rates or rates near zero.
Local investors' overseas stock transactions were also valued at some $128 billion in the first quarter of this year, marking the largest quarterly amount since the Korea Securities Depository began records in 2011. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, good afternoon. Thank you for coming on.
Good afternoon.
Well, stocks on Wall Street were down overnight. The three main indices by almost 1% each. A large part of that, at least on reports that the Biden administration is going to raise capital gains taxes on people with ultra high incomes. Tell us about that and the latest on the global markets.
Yes, the U.S. market fell somewhere close to about 1% for all the major indexes. If you look at Dow Jones was down 0.9%, S&P was down another also 0.9%, and NASDAQ was down also 0.9%. As you said, the U.S. President Joe Biden is planning a capital gains tax hike to as high as 43.4% for wealthy Americans in a bid to fund education and other spending priorities as a part of the administration's efforts to improve the U.S. economy. Clearly, this, if actually happens, is a negative news that the higher taxes mean that these high net worth individuals might be selling the U.S. equities. However, though, this is capital gains tax, so without equity market rising, you will not be able to charge any taxes. So therefore, this is not going to really cause the trend in the direction of the market if we believe that the U.S. economy is improving, that the Biden's policies will be in favor of equity market in the future. So I think that this is just a technical issues that causing the markets to be volatile. A lot of people were saying that the VIX index volatility has gone down to such a low level that it might create some volatilities, and these kind of news flows are creating such. And so therefore causing the market to be fairly volatile. However, if you really look at the potential for the actual tax hike, it might not be that much, number one. And number two, it might not be able to pass the Congress because the Republican might be opposing to this kind of policy changes. Previously, the corporate tax rate also was hindered because of the Republican disagreeing with that kind of policy. So we have to watch and see how this thing will play out. But overall, clearly created U.S. market to be fairly volatile at the current point in time.
Very interesting points you make there, Mr. Yu, about the capital gains tax rise. Of course, you do have to have a gain before it can be taxed. And as that news was digested here in Korea, the Korean stock market started out about where Wall Street left off, down sharply in the morning, and then back up into positive territory by mid-morning, ending the day with a slight gain. Tell us about the local markets.
Yes, Kospi actually again gained by 0.27% today. Kosdaq was also up about 0.11%. This is following the gains of 0.26% in the previous session. Clearly, foreign investors' overall selling has resulted into uncertainties about the market yesterday. But if you really look at the overall trend today, foreign investors were actually coming back to the market through the futures. They have net bought about 79 billion won worth of Korean equities through the futures market, and they didn't really sell much. And also, the local investors continue to be the net buyer of the Korean market based on these strong fundamentals. If you look at the Kospi's P multiples and Kosdaq's P multiples, they're all trading a much bigger discount than the U.S. market. And also with this kind of news of the capital gains tax might be charged to these U.S. market, the possibility of foreign investors coming to other markets in, let's say, Europe or Korea or Asian countries might be actually rising in the future. So all that is indicating that this is technicality in terms of this tax event. So what matters for Kospi and what matters for Kosdaq is what's happening to the earnings. And if you look at the earnings numbers, both of the markets are expected to show very strong growth and actually even higher earnings growth than the U.S. market. So therefore, I think the interest by the foreign investors as well as retail local investors will continue in the future.
And seemingly always in the news these days, the price of Bitcoin, it continues to come down from its all-time high a week or two ago. It's a volatile market, of course, and to some it might feel like we've been here before. But what do you see happening in the crypto space?
Well, with the news of Arirang token that rising by 10,000% in a less than a day, that's clearly an issue because that is clearly a huge speculation causing a huge bubble in this area. If you look at the overall Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency market, it amounts to about $2 trillion plus, and that is about 20% of the overall gold market value. So the volatility is there, and then a lot of the monies are flowing into this cryptocurrency because of these price changes. And there's a heavily leveraged trading is occurring here. So that's why I think that the government and central banks are going to tackle this very aggressively. If you look at the transaction volume, in some cases, especially for Korea, they're saying these cryptocurrency transaction has increased to even higher volume and amount than even the equity market transaction. So this has gone to too much. So government will tackle down on any kind of speculations or any illegal activities related to the cryptocurrencies. This is not going to just be happening for Korea, but it will be happening on a global scale. And most of the central bank will be introducing the electric currency, or we call it digital currency, in the future, because more and more transactions on the goods are made in online. So therefore, the need for this kind of currency is increasing. However, the cryptocurrency will not substitute all these kind of transactions in the future. So therefore, this kind of speculation is too much at the current point in time. And it will have some kind of value in terms of blockchain technology as well as the real so-called alternative assets. But it's not going to change or substitute for the currencies. So therefore, we don't think that the price movement is going to be in favor of investors at least in the short term.
Got it. Well, we've seen a little pullback in the price of oil, too. The pandemic very much a concern in terms of what kind of demand there'll be. And for a safe haven, some might still be looking at gold. What's happening with these two commodities?
Right. Gold prices has risen to around $67, $68 previously, and then fell down to below 60. Now it's remaining at around $61 per barrel. Fairly, it seems to be in a box range. We believe that the oil price is not going to go any higher or any lower, in a sense that the demand is definitely increasing with the overall economic growth rate happening in a global scale. And therefore, the demand is actually higher. However, the supply side is going to be very significant because of the shale gas and all the production capacity that you have seen. So we saw U.S. crude inventories rising much bigger than expected. So all in all, the oil price is not going to move that much. We think that it will range trade somewhere between $55 to $65 in the future. And more energy demand will be substituted by the alternative and renewable energies such as solar power or wind power, etc. In terms of the gold, obviously with this uncertainty happening in the cryptocurrency area, gold is the alternative assets on the basis of currency, the liquidity injection happening right now. If you look at the currency value, it is going down because of such a huge increase in the money printing and also M1 growth rate. So clearly the demand for the alternative asset will continue. It's just question mark between whether you want to buy the cryptocurrency or you want to buy the gold. It seems that these are kind of substituting each other. So with the cryptocurrency price falling quite sharply, we have seen gold prices rising. I think pretty much that's what's going to happen in the future. But I think that the demand for these alternative assets will continue to happen in the future.
All right, fascinating discussion there, Mr. Yu. Thanks so much for sharing your insights with us, and have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you very much.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in has reaffirmed to other world leaders his country's commitment to tackling climate change, saying the country will step up its already ambitious goals for reducing emissions. He spoke at the virtual Leaders Summit on Climate on Thursday, an event hosted by U.S. President Joe Biden. Our senior Blue House correspondent Kim Min-ji has the details.
South Korea will increase its target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions or the nationally determined contribution as part of efforts to enhance the country's climate action to achieve carbon neutrality. President Moon Jae-in reaffirmed Seoul's commitment on Thursday during the virtual Leaders Summit on Climate, hosted by U.S. President Joe Biden.
한국은 2030 국가 온실가스 감축 목표 NDC를 추가 상향하여 올해 안에 유엔에 제출할 것입니다. 한국은 지난해 NDC를 기존의 배출 전망치 기준에서 2017년 대비 24.4% 감축하겠다는 절대량 기준으로 변경함으로써 1차 상향한 바 있습니다.
It's in line with the key Paris Agreement goal to limit global warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. South Korea, the world's seventh largest carbon emitter, declared to go carbon neutral by 2050 and unveiled its Green New Deal initiative to speed up the process. To that end, Moon said it was imperative for the world to scale down coal-powered plants, announcing that the country will end all public financing for overseas coal projects.
신규 해외 석탄 화력 발전소에 대한 공적 금융 지원을 전면 중단할 것입니다. 우리 정부는 출범 후 국내 신규 석탄 화력 발전소 건설 허가를 전면 중단하고 노후 석탄 화력 발전소 10기를 조기 폐지하여 석탄 화력 발전을 과감히 감축했으며 대신 태양광과 풍력 등 재생에너지 발전을 빠르게 늘리고 있습니다.
President Moon, who wore a tie made from plastic waste and with a marine waste-made lapel on his suit, also called for active interest in the P4G Summit on Green Growth and Sustainable Development, which Seoul will host next month. He said South Korea will make thorough preparations so that it provides a platform to create actionable visions to serve as the stepping stone for the success of the UN Climate Change Conference in November. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
New commitments not only from President Moon, but also from the EU, Japan, and other countries. But there were no such commitments from two of the world's worst polluters, India and China. Kim Do-yeon has this report.
40 global leaders met virtually to pledge for a greener Earth as U.S. President Joe Biden hosted a summit taking the steering wheel once again in the collective efforts to tackle climate change. It includes the U.S.'s goal of cutting carbon emissions by 50 to 52% below 2005 levels by the year 2030, before achieving neutrality in 2050.
This is the decade we must make decisions that will avoid the worst consequences of the climate crisis. We must try to keep the Earth's temperature to an increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
This is a rate which is even more aggressive than the country's previous goal during the Obama administration. The European Union said it will cut the emissions by 55% below levels seen in 1990 by the year 2030. Prime Minister Suga said that Japan would reduce emissions by 46% in 2030 compared to 2013 levels. Previously, the country had pledged only a 26% cut in emissions. In addition, financial commitments were made by the UK and other countries, including the US Green Climate Fund, which will be providing financial support for developing countries dealing with the mounting environmental impact.
We can do this together across the world. And it's going to mean the richest nations coming together and exceeding the $100 billion commitment that they already made in 2009. I stress how important that is.
But the leaders of India and China, two of the world's biggest emitters, made no new commitments. Other special guests praised the motivation of the world leaders, including the Pope, who made a short appearance after delivering his Earth Day speech separately.
all of you, and I join you as well, appeal to all the world's leaders to act courageously, with justice, and always tell the truth to people, so that people may know how to protect themselves from the destruction of the planet, how to protect the planet from the destruction that very often we trigger.
The next major climate meeting for global leaders has been set in November, when they will meet for the 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And about a month from now, the Korean capital will be holding a key international forum on climate and sustainability, the P4G Seoul Summit. Now the organizers have unveiled what they call the key visuals of the summit under the slogan, "Green we go, change we make." The organizers say this image depicts participation and action, as well as the goal of inclusive green recovery towards carbon neutrality. The visuals were created in collaboration with calligrapher Lee Jung-hwa. Seoul will host the virtual P4G Summit on May 30th and 31st with world leaders from 12 countries. The Korean government aims to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, having announced its ambitious plans last December. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.